It's August 24th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with North Korea's second attempt to launch what it claims to be a space launch vehicle. The North failed with another spy satellite launch early this morning and will go for a third try in October. South Korea has started the analysis of the satellites with the U.S. and Japan and geared up for additional provocations. Japan is reportedly set to release Fukushima wastewater into the Pacific Ocean starting at 1 p.m. this afternoon, as long as the concentration levels of tritium meet the standard of below 1,500 becquerels per liter. Wagner chief Yevgeny Prigozhin is presumed dead after a plane with his name on the passenger list crashed northwest of Moscow on Wednesday. This comes 2 months after he led a brief mutiny against Russia in June. Our top story this morning, North Korea shot for a second attempt to launch its very first spy satellite, now only to experience yet another failure. For more, our North Korean affairs correspondent Lee Jae-hyun is on the line. Lee-hyun, tell us more about this latest launch attempt.
Right, Tommy. Pyongyang's second attempt to put a satellite in orbit took place at around 3:50 a.m. on Thursday, according to the North Korea Central News Agency. The flight's first and second stages of the rocket were normal, but during the third stage, it failed due to an error in the emergency blasting system. The North state media said that the North Korean National Aerospace Development Administration will explain the reason for the error in a short time, adding that the third attempt will likely come in October. It also said that although it failed, the cause of the relevant accident was not a big issue in terms of the reliability of the Cascade engines and the system. Multiple Japanese news outlets said that Japan's Coast Guard had earlier presumed that the launch could have been a ballistic missile, adding that it separated into pieces which landed in the West Sea, East China Sea, and the Pacific Ocean near the Philippines. South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff in this statement said that it detected the rocket flying above international waters off the Korean Peninsula's west coast after it launched the northeast area where the main space launch center is located. The official also said that it will continue high-intensity Seoul-Washington joint military drills known as Ulji Freedom Shield while closely monitoring Pyongyang's further actions.
Right, and South Korea convened a National Security Council meeting immediately. Lee-hyun, what did they have to say about the launch attempt?
That's right, Tommy. Officials from the Southeast Defense Ministry and other related officials attended the National Security Council meeting at around 6 a.m. Members of the council strongly condemned the launch and said that it clearly violates the UN Security Council resolutions. It also deplored the fact that North Korea is focusing on launching spy satellites when the majority of North Korean citizens are suffering from starvation and death. President Yoon Suk-yeol also ordered officials to brace for any additional provocations by North Korea and to carry out what had been pledged in the Camp David Trilateral Summit earlier, such as sharing missile alert information in real time, strengthening defense ties for missile provocations, and regularizing trilateral military drills. The council also agreed that Pyongyang should be made to pay a price for carrying out the launch. U.S. officials also agreed that the failed launch is a violation of the UN Security Council resolutions, adding that it still pursues dialogue without preconditions with North Korea. That's all I have for this hour, but I'll be back with more updates in a later newscast. Tommy?
Right, that was our Lee Jae-hyun covering the North Korea's second attempt to launch its first spy satellite, launching it from North Korea's Dongchang-ri. Thank you, Lee Jae-hyun. Earlier on Wednesday, Washington imposed fresh sanctions on the co-founder of virtual currency mixer Tornado Cash for assisting a North Korean hacking group that stole hundreds of millions of dollars in cryptocurrency. According to the U.S. Treasury Department, it has sanctioned Roman Semenov, one of the three founders of Tornado Cash. The department says Semenov assisted the Lazarus Group, a North Korean state-sponsored hacking group. Tornado Cash has been known to launder illicit funds, as virtual currency mixers obscure the origin of cryptocurrency funds to make transactions difficult to trace. Lazarus Group used Tornado Cash to launder $455 million stolen in the Axie Infinity Ronin hack last year. That is the largest known virtual currency heist to date. Regarding last week's trilateral summit between the leaders of South Korea, the U.S. and Japan, the U.S. ambassador in Seoul says the security agreement made at Camp David is not legally binding like NATO, but a political agreement. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji has the details.
The U.S. ambassador to South Korea, Philip Goldberg, says the commitment to consult, which outlines Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo's commitment to coordinate their responses to regional threats, is not a binding agreement. While meeting reporters on Wednesday afternoon at his residence in Seoul, he stressed that Camp David is not a new NATO. He explained that it's not a duty nor a military alliance between South Korea and Japan, but rather a cooperative step where the three countries can interact when there are common threats.
So you can think of it more as a political agreement than a legally binding agreement.
When asked if the commitments made at Camp David will last even after elections, he said the interactions that will take place in the next several months will make it an enduring relationship, regardless of the political factors in each country.
It has a very strong commitment from the three leaders. In the case of the United States, there's a tremendous bipartisan agreement, of which isn't all that common in our political life, in support of this.
As for the possibility of the second trilateral summit taking place in Seoul, he said the invitation by President Yoon was well received, but refrained from confirming further details. He also highlighted President Yoon's role in bringing the three countries together by taking forward-looking policies and leadership to improve relations between Seoul and Tokyo. He added that while this relationship is very important to Washington, it depends on the people and the leaders of the two countries, and that it's not something the U.S. can and would resolve. Since taking office in May last year, President Yoon has been working to restore ties with Japan by resolving historical disputes, such as the issue of compensating the Korean victims of wartime forced labor during Japan's colonial rule, before and during World War II. Meanwhile, as for the issue of Japan's plan to release wastewater from the destroyed Fukushima nuclear power plant, the ambassador said the U.S. and South Korea's positions align, adding that Japan has followed the internationally accepted process. 배은지, 아리랑 뉴스.
Japan is set to begin releasing Fukushima wastewater into the Pacific Ocean later this afternoon. Now, once the final inspection is complete, the first round of the 30-year-long operation will kick off at 1 p.m. Lee Kyung-eun reports.
The discharge of Fukushima wastewater will likely start on Thursday at around 1 p.m. That's according to Japanese news outlet Kyodo News, which reports the Japanese government and the Tokyo Electric Power Company are deciding on the schedule. An inspection is underway to decide whether the wastewater meets the safety standard when it comes to tritium levels. The Tokyo Electric Power Company on Wednesday said it has sent 1 ton of wastewater to the dilution equipment late on Tuesday, diluted with seawater, to check the concentration levels of tritium. Levels of tritium, a radioactive substance that cannot be separated from water even after applying the advanced liquid processing system, should be below 1,500 becquerels per liter. Kyodo News reports that the results of the test is expected to come out before Thursday, and if the standards are met, TEPCO will release the water as originally planned, and around 460 tons of diluted wastewater will be discharged daily for the next 17 days. Meanwhile, multiple Japanese media outlets report that even after the release, the final goal of completely shutting down the Fukushima nuclear power plant may take a long time. Asahi Shimbun on Wednesday said the wastewater tank will be removed after the discharging process, and the nuclear fuel debris from the power plant will be stored. Around 880 tons of fuel debris is expected to be generated from the plant's 3 reactors. In addition, reports also suggest that the Japanese government hasn't decided on how it will manage a large amount of fuel debris, and measures to prevent wastewater from rain and other means are yet to be put in place. Mainichi Shimbun also said the radiation levels differ by each tank, and 70% of it does not meet the safety standards, meaning that a complete release may take longer than expected. One of the editorials in the newspaper also advised that the Japanese officials should face the reality, and it's practically impossible for Japan to completely shut down the nuclear power plant by the year 2051. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
So the 3-decade-long release process will begin in a couple of hours. To discuss more, we are joined by Walter Sim from the Straits Times this morning. Welcome back to the program, Walter.
Thanks for having me, Tommy.
You know, there have been speculation that it could start as early as late August, but why do you think Japan has decided to push for the release today? Is it because earlier the better?
Well, indeed, I do think that the August 24th date, that is today, actually did catch quite a number of people by surprise here in Japan, because it was just last Sunday, after all, that Prime Minister Fumio Kishida went to Fukushima himself to inspect the site. And so things have really accelerated here since his return from Camp David on Sunday. But I suppose Mr. Kishida saw no reason to delay the process any longer after receiving first-hand explanations and a visual confirmation himself that it was really all systems go. So the IAEA has endorsed the plan. Japan has also put in plenty of diplomatic and domestic outreach as well. But whether or not Japan should be trying even harder, doing even more to convince the naysayers and detractors will of course be up for debate. But I do think it's impossible for Japan to convince everyone to come on board. And the sense here is that kicking the can down the road further will not help matters, especially since the water tanks on the site are already nearly full.
Right. Now, I can't stress this enough. It's a 30-year-long operation, you know, a long way to go. But what happens if there are issues that get in the way in terms of safety or even technical glitches?
Well, exactly. And I do think that this is indeed a very large and very valid concern. And Japan, as well as the plant operator TEPCO, did promise to stop operations immediately if something goes wrong. I also understand that South Korea, on its part, has also requested for an immediate halt, immediate suspension if things were to go wrong. So the discharge facility does have fail-safes. So there are emergency isolation valves built into the facility, and these can be activated both automatically and manually to suspend the release in case of any anomalies. So this could be, for instance, if the tritium water levels breaches the standards as agreed on, or in case of a natural disaster event, so be it an earthquake or a tsunami.
Right. On top of that, info sharing from Japan, you know, the IAEA gave South Korea a separate promise that it will update the country with regular updates regarding the release. But how much helpful is this guarantee for South Korea then?
Well, I do think that the intention of the guarantee is really to help allay fears or concerns. And so to do that, of course, more information and more transparency will be better than less information or less transparency. And the IAEA chief Grossi also did say that the only way to address legitimate concerns of the public is to keep them informed. So interestingly, I was speaking to an expert on risk perceptions, and this expert did say that people would tend to give more weight to their fears of the unknown and of, potential catastrophic impact than to hard science. And so it does not help that this science in itself has been disputed despite the backing of the IAEA. And the issue does seem especially combustive in South Korea, where opposition to the plan seems to be split along political lines. On that note, I really cannot say for sure if the guarantee will be effective when there's a change of government.
Right. Then would you say, for now, at least for now, is this something that South Korean government has done well, securing that promise from the international agency?
Definitely. And I do also think that the IAEA as well as Japan know the need to constantly engage with the South Korean government. South Korea is, of course, definitely a very important stakeholder in the Indo-Pacific region.
Right. And, the release is really on the way in about a couple of hours, in less than 4 hours, if it starts at 1 p.m. But what does Japan need to take care of within the release now ongoing then?
Well, Japan, of course, needs to make sure that whatever it releases, whatever it pumps out from Fukushima meets its own standards, because that really is a lot on the line. Japan will regularly monitor radioactivity of the nearby waters as well as seafood, and will provide constant, almost real-time information. It will also have to constantly fight disinformation and fake news, harmful rumors, and of course find ways to engage with regions that are against the plan, such as China, Russia, and Hong Kong. So it's not a case where, the water gets released starting today and that's the end of the story. On the contrary, I do think that Japan's responsibilities will be all the more severe once the discharge begins.
All right, Walter, I'm sure you have a very busy day ahead of you, but you still have a good day today.
Thanks. Thank you very much, Tommy.
Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of the Russian private military group Wagner, is believed to be dead after reports he was aboard a plane that crashed on Wednesday. The exact cause of the crash is still unknown. Lee Si-hoo tells us more.
The Russian paramilitary group Wagner's chief Yevgeny Prigozhin was on the list of passengers aboard a plane that crashed on Wednesday. Russia's Emergency Situations Ministry said that all 10 people aboard the plane were killed. The private plane was traveling from Moscow to St. Petersburg. Prigozhin, 62, founded and led the Wagner group, which rose to prominence in the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The group, which includes fighters recruited from prison, led the attack on the Ukrainian city of Bakhmut and claimed to have seized the city in late May this year. But there were clashes between the group and Russia's military. In late June, Prigozhin began a rebellion and claimed that Wagner had taken control of all military facilities in the key Russian city of Rostov-on-Don. The group continued to march on Moscow but stopped upon Prigozhin's orders. Prigozhin claimed he called off his march to save, quote, Russian blood, and his group was allowed to retreat to Belarus. But Vladimir Putin hours earlier had said that those responsible would suffer punishment, accusing Prigozhin of treason.
What we are facing now is treason. Unreasonable ambitions and personal interests lead to treachery, state treason, and the betrayal of our own people.
There are rising suspicions about the cause of the fatal plane crash.
Yes, would Putin have done this? Well, he has certainly the Russian security forces have a history of poisoning people at home and abroad, and political opponents or people that Mr. Putin has previously called traitors.
U.S. President Joe Biden on Wednesday told reporters that he was not surprised by the news.
There's not much that happens when Russia is not behind, but I don't know enough to know the answer.
Russia's Federal Agency for Air Transport has launched, quote, a specially created commission to investigate the crash. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
India made history on Wednesday by becoming the first country ever to reach the moon's south pole. That is Chandrayaan-3, meaning moon vehicle in Sanskrit. It'll now set about its task of searching for water on the lunar surface. Lee Seung-ja has more.
India is now just the fourth country after the United States, China, and the former Soviet Union to land a spacecraft on the moon after its Chandrayaan-3 spacecraft successfully touched down on the lunar surface on Wednesday. What made this latest lunar landing all the more special for India is that the unmanned spacecraft became the first to reach the moon's South Pole region. This is significant in that the South Pole region of the moon is considered an area of key scientific and strategic interest for spacefaring nations, with scientists believing that the area could have water ice deposits. And that could eventually be used to make rocket fuel or even drinking water for future crewed missions. Having watched the landing virtually, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who's currently in South Africa for the BRICS summit, praised the lunar landing, saying that the success belongs to all of humanity as it will help moon missions by other countries in the future. People in India took to the streets to celebrate, with people dancing, waving Indian flags, setting off firecrackers, and playing drums following the breakthrough mission. And following Chandrayaan-3's successful 384,400-kilometer trip, it's expected to remain functional for 2 weeks, running a series of experiments. This includes a spectrometer analysis of the mineral composition of the moon's surface. Lee Seung-ja, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in the U.S. state of Georgia, where former New York City mayor and former personal lawyer to Donald Trump, Rudy Giuliani, has surrendered to a jail in Atlanta. Now, Giuliani on Wednesday, local time, paid a $150,000 bail bond and left the jail after getting his mugshot taken. Now, he faces 13 charges related to alleged attempts to overturn the 2020 U.S. presidential election. He has called the case an attack on the American people. Giuliani is one of 19 defendants, including former President Donald Trump, and alongside Trump faces the most charges, including racketeering and making false claims about the 2020 election. 7 other co-defendants have so far turned themselves in. Trump has said he will surrender to jail on Thursday local time. Prosecutors have set a surrender deadline for Friday noon. Now, in Mexico, at least 16 people were killed and 36 injured on Tuesday local time after a bus crashed into a freight truck. Now, the bus was carrying 52 passengers, including locals, and 10 passengers from Venezuela. 15 Mexicans and 1 Venezuelan died in the crash. The incident took place on a highway near the border between the central states of Oaxaca and Puebla. The cause of the crash is still unknown, but local prosecutors have launched an investigation. According to Mexico's National Institute of Migration, the Venezuelans were on their way to an appointment with the United States Customs and Border Protection in a bid to legally enter the U.S. Now, in Argentina, over 100 people have been arrested for looting and looting attempts amid rising concerns over violence in the lead-up to a general election in October in Argentina's security minister. He said on Wednesday that the looting incidents across various parts of the country appear to be coordinated and they are not spontaneous. Small groups of people have been witnessed breaking into stores and stealing food, among other items, prompting the deployment of police to watch over stores. Now, blame for the incident has been exchanged between the office of the sitting president, Alberto Fernandez, and radical libertarian and rival Javier Milei. Milei won most of the votes in a presidential primary in August. He has campaigned on Argentina's struggle with an annual inflation rate of 113% and a cost of living crisis.
Good morning. Rain was pounding down in the capital all throughout the day yesterday, and today eastern parts of the country will receive heavy showers. Right now, Busan and Gyeongsang-do Provinces are being drenched with 30 millimeters an hour of heavy rainfall. So a heavy rain warning has been issued in Busan and parts of Gyeongsang-do Provinces, and Jeju Island are under a heavy rain advisory. The southern coast of Gyeongsang-do Province could see 70 millimeters an hour of rain hammering down today. In fact, Gyeongsang-do Provinces and surrounding regions will be hit the hardest, with more than 200 millimeters of downpours expected along with strong winds. So please stay safe. Afternoon highs in Seoul and most of the western regions will be a couple of degrees higher, topping out at 29 degrees here in Seoul, but eastern regions will be 3 to 5 degrees lower along with that showers. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Friday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.
하나, 둘, 셋. Mr. Cupid, who's my way? Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Hello, I'm Gustav Slamečka, Czech ambassador. Arirang TV is doing its best as a media diplomacy channel representing Korea by delivering current affairs information and news in a balanced voice. Everyone I meet can get news about Korea through Arirang, and we are thankful. I hope Arirang TV will continue to take the lead in delivering Korea's news to the world, and I hope it will be a channel for the world and Korea to synthesize. Resonating with the world, Arirang.
Busan, Korea is already reaching the entire world, like ocean waves that travel far and wide. It's Busan, the perfect World Expo city, transforming our world, navigating toward a better future.
Arirang, what matters?
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, who's my way? Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation. Making news just for you. It's August 24th here in Seoul. I'm Shin Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Cheska Dainong.
Pleasure to be here.
Good morning. And Nelson. Good morning. All right. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of people in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. Now, recently, many drones set aside for educational purposes in the Korean Army have malfunctioned. Back in September, the Financial Management Corps brought in a total of 651 drones from domestic manufacturers. Around 100 of them fell from the sky as soon as they were flown up, and military officials are looking into whether these drones were manufactured and brought in directly from China. And the number of people who are deciding to retrieve their national pension fund earlier than when they're recommended to is increasing on year. Normally in Korea, it's recommended that you receive these funds at the age of 65, and if you start taking monthly pension payments a year earlier, your total pension would be 6% less than what you could have gotten. If you try to get pension payments 5 years earlier, you'd only get 70% of what you could have. And officials found the reason behind these early withdrawals is because people are either financially struggling at the moment or because they think it would be better to use these funds now. And from today, Japan will be releasing treated wastewater from its wrecked Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. Leading up to this day, though, people have already canceled their plans to eat omakase at famous sushi restaurants and are choosing not to eat seafood anymore. Consumers Korea conducted a survey on 525 people. 9 out of 10 of them said they would try having less seafood from now on. 6 out of 10 said they've already reduced consumption due to safety concerns. And South Korea's Ministry of SMEs and Startups and the Ministry of Oceans and Fisheries are looking for ways to help seafood business owners out. So far, the Korean government has said that there's no scientific evidence or technical problem that proves that Japan's decision is dangerous. Officials didn't approve or oppose the plan, though, which experts believe has to do with the Yoon administration trying to keep Japan as a close security ally. And the IAEA also said it would regularly inform Korea about how the wastewater is being discharged from the Fukushima power plant. The UN nuclear watchdog will be stationed on site to provide real-time safety updates. Now, hearing all of this, are you still willing to eat seafood from today now?
I really love poke and sushi. So I don't know how much intake I will decrease, but I also think it's something that after a while people will kind of forget about it and go back to the regular routine. So I'm not too concerned about it, but maybe I should be. I don't know. It's all very confusing.
But then again, I know how much you love poke.
I do. I ask her to eat every single day.
I think every time we have lunch together, it's either poke or something with seafood.
Sushi.
Yeah. But so you're saying that it's not going to affect you at the moment right now?
At the moment.
You'll have to see how it goes. What about you, Cheska?
I think I would probably be one of the people that have been surveyed that would probably decrease my intake from now on. Only because even though there have been no scientific or technical reports on the effect of this being released, these things usually take time for things to be, figured out or the evidence to come up to surface. And I hope the government does do something more proactive so that consumers like myself who love seafood, I mean, we talked about it. My nickname is Che Shaku.
You're Che Shark. Because you're like a shark.
She eats so much fish.
They're what my friends call me. So for consumers like us, it is a big problem, especially for people who practice like pesco diet, like myself. It is a huge part of our protein source. And now there have been many reports that it is even more dangerous to eat seafood, to consume omega-3 than to just take omega-3 supplements because there are so many, pollutants and things in the fish and in the water right now.
So it's better to have these vitamins than to have actual natural food. Bad news for Che Shark, I guess. But speaking of all these different types of eating habits and what we'll be eating from now on, this actually is a good segue to our discussion topic of the day. Today, we're going to be analyzing why a growing number of people from our generation are choosing not to have meat. In other words, we're going to zoom in on this new trend of increasing vegetarian populations here in Korea, even in Korea, where most dishes seem to include meat. How does this happen? Take a look at the screen.
If you type hard to be vegetarian in on Google, one of the countries that pops up first is South Korea. That's because meat and fish are a huge part of Korean food, ranging from the famous Korean barbecue to different types of broth. But surprisingly, we've still seen a big jump in the number of Korean vegetarians over the years. Back in 2008, we only had around 150,000 people who chose the vegetarian lifestyle. This number has jumped to 2 million as of last year. Online sales of vegan products in 2021 also saw a 20% increase.
But why? Why are we seeing a growing number of people, especially millennials and Gen Z, become vegetarian here in Korea? Let's find out. First, by asking our panelists what they think about vegetarianism.
So I mentioned a little bit earlier, giving the funny nickname that my friends gave me. I kind of go between pesco and what we call flexitarian.
What's that?
So that's a flexible vegetarian. So I choose to, cater my diet more to vegetarian, but I'm not completely vegetarian.
So you're flexibly vegetarian.
Very much so. And I think mine started when I was like 19, 20, when I was in college.
Wow.
So I went on this volunteer mission camp, and there they educated us on meal preparation through animal, slaughtering and how the meat is processed. And I'm not against meat consumption because I eat it too. But the thing is, I realized how disconnected I was from the food that I was eating to how it was prepared.
Right.
So from then on, I sort of catered my diet to, okay, if I can, possibly slaughter it and prepare it, maybe I should consume it. But if I can't, maybe I should lessen it at least. And not to mention the environmental pollution that is caused by methanes, the water pollution and the land that is used to raise cattle. I also realized there's a lot of socio-economic politics that is involved with the meat industry that is changing or shaping our narratives to a very skewed version.
Right.
So that is something that I try to practice in order to kind of, I guess, align myself more properly. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why I don't think being vegetarian or being vegan is just an eating consumption. It's actually a lifestyle because it encompasses your values in life and how you envision where to go in life. What about you, Nal? Do you think that, what do you find about vegetarianism?
It's difficult because I love meat and I am torn inside as I am fighting between the animal rights versus the environment and my love for meat. But I have been trying to increase my vegetable intake mostly because of my health, but I do feel a lot lighter and I can't imagine what a vegan diet would do to help with my health. But I can't say that I've loved all the vegan desserts that I've tried. I'm a huge dessert fan. Yes. What?
Sorry, there's a dessert expert here that just the red flag.
Are you?
I am a huge dessert expert, and there are so many great vegan dessert cafes.
Maybe I just haven't tried the right places. I'll just go right after the show. I'll follow Cheska to a dessert place and give it a second chance. But I think it's kind of recent, the vegan restaurants and even vegan bakeries that's been coming into Korea. I think it was 5 years ago I tried my vegan bakery in Korea for the first time, and it kind of left a bitter taste in my mouth, if you can. Yeah, so I think that's my biggest concern, but I definitely think I see the value in going a little more towards flexitarian or vegetarianism. And yeah, I do think as somebody who travels a lot, it's difficult when you go, you can't necessarily choose, pick and choose. But yeah, it's something that I'm struggling and thinking with.
Let me take you guys all on a vegan dessert cafe date.
I know, I love it.
A list of places.
I was going to say, if you tried it out 5 years ago, much has changed since then. I think you can back me up on this.
More variety, too.
Exactly. And that's because I think our generation is leading this new type of lifestyle, whether that's being vegetarian or vegan. And would you guys agree to that statement that our generation is much more interested in this?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can already tell by the market size that it's growing, and there's so many good brands that are out, restaurants that are out right now.
Dessert places that are out.
Yes, there you must go to. And also, I think for me, I have a lot of international friends that have influenced me. So we would throw like cute vegetarian parties, like go on these vegan cafe diets. So also, I was actually kind of curious to see what about the South Korean, our generation, like how do they find vegetarian diet? So let's take a look at the screen. So when asked if they actually practice the flexitarian diet that we mentioned, so flexible vegetarian, almost 30% of those surveyed responded yes.
Wow.
That's 1 out of 3 people, right?
Wow.
So as I mentioned, I was actually pleasantly surprised at the number of people that are willing, or at least trying to do vegetable diet. And I think one of the main, I guess, reasons for doing vegetarian is obviously for health, health reasons, health concerns.
Yeah.
And there are some really great documentaries that I saw that actually, you know, athletes, when they change to vegan diet, their muscle performance and their muscle growth actually increase.
Oh.
So there are some very interesting facts about the benefits of vegan diet. And also, I mean, there's so many good brands like Organica or like Vegan Cafe that we mentioned before going on the show that, you know, they taste really good.
They do.
They taste really, really good. So it's almost like I'm not losing out on anything, but choosing to be a little bit flexible and just to add on the environmental benefits.
I was going to ask you about that. The environmental effects seem to be really good, right?
Yes. So if I didn't know this, but apparently if you do one vegetarian diet a week, like just once a week, it's equivalent to stopping the operation of about 4.5 million cars on the road.
Wow. So
only 5 cars.
4.5 million cars, and all you need to do is just use 1 day of the week, right? One day. That's not too hard.
Wow.
And we're not even talking about like chewing on leaves. We're talking about like good vegetarian meal.
You keep advocating that there's so many good substitutes out there. If anyone
I don't want to frighten people.
I know. If anyone wants to go to a good vegan or vegetarian restaurant in Korea, go with Cheska. Now, what about you, Nell? Would you agree that our generation is interested in vegetarianism?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we're the generation that's seen the most drastic climate change. We also grew up with a lot of pets, so a lot of people are really interested in animal rights and, you know, animal abuse. So there's definitely a bigger movement and interest towards vegetarianism. And, you know, there's a lot of people, like Jessica mentioned, I guess a third of our nation trying to be a flexitarian. And but I feel like it's hard to be fully vegan 100% of the time, which is why a lot of people are interested in the whole flexitarian idea.
And, you know, I think it'd be a good step for you too, Nell, because I know you're exercising these days. And Cheska, you mentioned the health benefits and how athletes are boosting their productivity.
Right,
so I will join you in the
if it tastes good, sign me up for whatever food.
So instead of our poke lunch dates, we'll try to go on really nice vegan and vegetarian
that would be actually really nice. That could be our next date outing.
It could be.
I love it.
Now, we asked if our global viewers are vegetarian or if they're interested in ever becoming one. And here's what 3 of them had to share with us. If you take a look at the screen, Dan said, I was a vegetarian for a while. At first, I lost 30 pounds, but I was hungry a lot and had to prepare food often. I still really like to eat vegan, but I mostly don't. Courtney Vegan said, I'm an 8-year vegan from Ottawa, Canada. It's so easy being vegan. I even eat Korean food like kimchi. Not supporting the torture and death of animals makes me feel good. Vegan for the win. And Mola said, I'm an Indian and vegetarianism is a way of life for many here, and I'm glad that's the case. As such, much of the cuisine is centered around it and makes good use of vegetables, pulses, grains, etc. You know, this topic really does interest me because back in college I did a lot of reports on vegetarianism because it's really hard to be one in Korea. Almost everything is brothed out of meat. If you go to company get-togethers or hang out with your friends.
Oh my goodness. Actually,
the easiest place you can go is Korean barbecue. Samgyeopsal places. But then, while I was reporting at the time, I could completely agree with our viewers because there's a very good diet effect to it. You eat green, you eat healthy, you lose a lot of weight. So there seems to be a lot of pros and cons. But in order for you to survive as a vegan or vegetarian, the infrastructure and the restaurants that are around you should be good. And it's difficult in Korea, but how is it in other parts of the world?
You know, I definitely think it could be easier abroad. Like, for example, in the States, there's so many different options for special diets. There's halal, there's kosher, gluten-free, dairy-free, something. And there's
lactose-free.
Lactose-free. Yeah, so everybody is so used to having many different options, and that's considered normal. But I think, you know, what you were saying earlier about company outings and meetings, nobody in Korea says, okay, good job on this project, guys, let's go eat some salad. You know, it's kind of difficult to move towards that. But, you know, as our generation is getting older and we're the ones who will be leading the next generation, maybe it will happen. But I really think it's all about the cultural context and how much people are used to the idea.
Right. And if I may add on a personal anecdote, my friend who's been vegetarian for such a long time in Korea, when she went to a company get-together back like 6-7 years ago, she would be frowned upon for packing her own salad. But nowadays, because a lot of people from our generation are at companies, they're welcoming that and they're asking her where she makes her salads or which has the best vegan products, as you mentioned too, Cheska. So I do think we are seeing a change in social atmosphere. Now, Cheska, would you like to add on whether you think it's actually easier to survive as a vegetarian in other parts of the world?
You know, that's a very interesting question because, as you mentioned, our culture does have a meat culture. When we get together, we feel like we have to treat our guests with meat, like that's the right and proper way to do so. And personally, in my experience, I think Korea is easy to be flexitarian because we have the kimbap, the bibimbap. So when I go to like kimbap stores, I usually ask them to take out the meat portion, or you can just take it out yourself. Or we have these delicacies, the side dishes that make from vegetables and then pair that with rice. And also, you mentioned such a really good point. I hope our culture changes a little bit more so that people who are practicing vegan or vegetarian can be respected. Like it's their life choice that is not affecting or harming anyone.
It isn't.
So I don't want anyone to be frowned upon just because they're practicing something for the betterment of themselves.
Exactly, especially in an era where we respect diversity and so much representation, might as well be accepting this new type of lifestyle. And in order for us to do that, we actually have a vegan who's been practicing it for 12 years here in Korea. We have a live interview with him prepared for you right after this. As hard as it seems to be vegetarian in Korea, we've managed to find someone who's been vegan for 12 years here. It's Shin Won-seok, who's also a filmmaker in Seoul. Welcome, Won-seok.
Hello.
Well, hello.
Good
Thank you for having me.
All right, Won-seok. I'd like to ask you the first question.
I feel so old and ancient doing you guys. But thank you for having me.
No, it's a pleasure to have you here. And Won-seok, I'd like to ask you, when did you decide to become vegan and why?
So I became vegan about 12 years ago. And at the time, I came across a newspaper article, I think it was in the New York Times, where I learned that 80% of the antibiotics that produced in the United States was being used for livestock. And that was shocking to me because why? And then I learned about the reality of the factory farming. That's how the meat is cheap. And, so these animals, they get injected with antibiotics, and that's what we eat. And then I learned about the environmental impact, and then, of course, the inhumane way they are treated. So I thought, knowing all the truth, I can't just go back and pretend that, this food comes from like this ranch, where these cows are, living a happy life. That wasn't the case. So I decided to become vegan, of course, 12 years ago. It was as impossible, but then I love challenges, so I decided to, why don't I do that? Yeah.
And Won-seok, I remember when we were doing projects together and we would go out to eat with the company or the people, you would go and find a vegan restaurant. So as we talked about here in the studio, it's very hard as Korean to, when you're going to a company get-together or having like these meals, to choose like a vegan-specific meals. How do you manage being vegan in South Korea working?
For 12 years, too.
Yeah.
Impressive.
Well, so fortunately, I don't work in a corporate environment, so I don't have to interact with the people every day. But it is very, for my friends who are vegan and who work at companies, they do have a hard time, especially these so-called 회식, these company meals. The problem in Korea is the lack of diversity. I think in terms of they don't really respect, like sometimes a boss say, hey, let's go eat some samgyeopsal, but they don't really ask anybody, oh, you guys don't like a samgyeopsal? They don't really ask for anybody's opinion. So you go to these restaurants, and then most Korean restaurants don't have a vegan option. But you can also manage. I think I have some friends who will say, they will ask the restaurant, like, can you make like 된장찌개? But without the anchovy broth, no meat. And, a lot of the restaurants actually, they can do that for you. So you can manage it. And then, of course, more restaurants are now having vegan options. So hopefully, we're making progress. Yeah.
Great. So I hear that you are a filmmaker, and as a vegan, you're interested in making a new film or drama about living as a vegan. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
So yeah, for the past few years, I've been working on a new script. It's actually started as a feature film, but then now I'm actually turning it into a TV series. It's called The Accent of Vegan, or the Korean title is 풀떼기 소녀, and it's about basically 4 different women in their in their late 20s whose lives are turned upside down when some of them become vegan. So I'm still working on the script. Meanwhile, it is very hard to create a story about veganism when veganism is very, very still small. So I am also especially the gatekeepers, the people who make decisions about these projects. They're mostly like middle-aged men, they have no idea, So I'm actually so I started actually a YouTube channel not so long ago, dedicated to like a vegan lifestyle in Seoul. So it's like a vegan vlog. Which is like taking up a lot of time for me, but I'm enjoying it. Yeah.
And at the end of the day, I don't think today's topic is constrained to age per se. You mentioned in the very beginning that you feel old to be on our show, which targets millennials and Gen Z. But I think regardless of which generation you're from, this is a very critical issue because it impacts what we'll be seeing in the future. And in that sense, would you like to encourage more young people to become vegan? If so, give us one tip on how we could start.
Oh, wow. So, well, I definitely see progress because 12 years ago, there was like nobody I consider a vegan friend, but now I have quite a few friends, who are vegan, and they're mostly like young, like Gen Zs or millennials. So definitely I see the progress. And then, we have to also realize that we are living in the era of a climate crisis. And animal agriculture is responsible for 14% of the carbon emissions, at least.
Yeah.
So if we can, I know you guys talked about this earlier, and if we can reduce meat consumption, that's going to help a lot, because this is our reality. So for young people, if you want to live in a beautiful planet as it is, I think that we should, maybe do something more, like there are ways to fight climate crisis, and one of them is maybe trying to live like a plant-based lifestyle. So, but how do you begin? That's always hard, but you have to also seek out the likely-minded people.
Yeah.
It's always a lot of times I meet these new vegan friends, and they're always complaining about not having vegan friends. Yes, of course, you're the only vegan, in your circle of friends, but then you have to reach out to, maybe you find them on social media, maybe you find some meetups, go out there. There's some chat rooms on different messenger platforms. You join them and then learn about how other people do it, and then it'll be easier, and then of course you find out about some new vegan cafes and
exactly. You need that network of friends in order for you to start.
Yeah, there are lots of great vegan desserts in Seoul right now. So I think
okay, got it.
We'll take your word for that. Thank you so much, Won-sung. It was a pleasure to talk to you today.
Well, thank you for having me.
And now, so will you be willing to become vegetarian?
You guys have actually, I'm not even kidding, convinced me a little bit, because I love good food, and from everything that I've heard today, there's some good ones out there. So I'll try it, and I really want what's better for the planet as well. So here's to, trying at least.
And you know who will help you? It'd be our flexitarian Cheska.
And if I may give just one really quick, easy tip, just eat something delicious. That's it.
Eat something delicious.
Eat delicious vegan food. Lower the hurdle. That's it.
Yeah. All right. And please do take us, because you're the friend here, as Won-sung mentioned, who will sort of promote vegetarianism in our daily lives now.
I will be the one to influence all of you.
Exactly. And we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Cheska Dainha.
Pleasure's always mine.
And Hal-sung.
No problem.
All right. And thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are New Generation.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠.